Let's get started with Disintegration, an ability that causes the user to make other people they touch or interact with flake and scatter into tiny pieces, which essentially causes them to break. Users of this terrifying power can cause other targets, whether inorganic or organic material, to lose cohesion by various means. Some can make matter fall apart into dust, wipe away their target on a molecular or subatomic level, or even revert matter into pure energy or pure energy into disturbed matter. Regardless of the means, the target is reduced to either molecular or subatomic dust and/or energy, but not absolutely annihilated. That's the one thing about this ability. Now, we should all know what disintegration is, especially if you dropped a cracker or a potato chip, or just even watch TV. But for those who don't, to disintegrate is to break up into small parts, typically as the result of impact, cohesion loss, or decay. So I'm gonna just go ahead and state this before you guys can. Yes, this ability is a powerful one, but it's pretty dang straightforward. But regardless of that, it's still worthy of a pretty longish video. So the Shay has to be honest and state that this power is a splinter off the branch of transmutation. Because we all know that the act of transmutation, or transforming something into another, requires you to 1. Have knowledge of what you're doing, 2. Be able to destroy, break down, or reduce the target so that later they can, 3. Be rebuilt or reshaped into whatever they can using what was deconstructed earlier. But to get back on the point of disintegration, all you need to do out of the 3 steps listed before is just stop at number 2. That's where this ability lives and pretty much breathes. So with that in mind, I'm telling you guys right now that hitting that like and subscribe button will make you immune to the effects of this power, which basically means it'll stop breaking down anything before you can actually learn it. In fact, it'll even give you the ability to destroy anything blocking your attempts to collect these building blocks of information. If you're just here for the applications, uses, and users of this power, then skip ahead to this time. If you're ready to shatter like glass and then pulverize into sand and then grind into dust, then stand on the other side of the room and let's get on with this video. The origins of disintegration go back to the beginning of time and then stretch all the way to the end of time, as eventually all things come to an end and eventually lead to a state of decay. Yeah, go ahead, go on and think about it. No matter what it is, everything ends in its own time. Whether it's the shelf life of food and or chemicals, the process that causes nuclear fission in stars, or just an animal expiring from atrophy or old age. Eventually, everything returns to dust and falls apart. So if disintegration, or the concept of decay, exists like it does in our real tangible world, then you know it had to have an influence on our myth and legends. I mean, duh, but not in the way that we would think. Disintegration as we imagine it doesn't have a deity or some kind of ethereal being that represented it. The closest I can think of would be the concept of decay, and Lord knows that there are endless amount of mythical beings that encompass that domain. But there are examples of divine beings or a horseman of the apocalypse type figure, one that spreads diseases which will eventually decay living things. But there are also divines that represent necessary destruction, like Shiva of Hindu mythology, Phthis, the literal Greek personification of rotten decay, or any ethereal being that represents the concept of death. I won't list them all, but you guys get the idea. They all make their home within this concept at that point in time in the before 4 days. So when people refer to the concept of disintegration, it's the kind that has to do with the turning into dust type of disintegration. And obviously there are dozens of ways to do that. But if we're getting down to the bare essentials, I would say the most important thing that happens is the object's need to break apart or split into smaller pieces. This can be done through a physical change where something as simple as physical force is used to shatter something. And in theory, could be used, but things that shatter through a physical force normally have the capability to be pasted back together in some way, shape, or form. But there also exists a chemical change where the object is shifted and cannot be reverted back to its previous form. Examples of this include massive temperature changes, or being ionized or supercharged in some way, shape, or form. But simply put, in order to break molecules or cause something to break apart, no matter how you do it, whether it's physically or chemically, you need to find a way to subvert or channel massive amounts of energy into said molecular bond in order to break it. This will in turn create a massive backlash of energy, aka an explosion. So symbolically, disintegration in terms of the concept and power represents more or less a separation or breakdown of a system. But getting back into this concept as a superpower, when this ability is shown, it normally has a comedic effect to it, or whatever causes the act of disintegration. And is usually simplified or censored in a way. For example, instead of showing someone who this ability was used on melting and becoming a pile of flesh or being shredded into ribbons of skin and bone, you'll normally see the stereotypical death ray or disintegration effect or beam cover the target in energy and then turn them into a pile of ash or dust. And don't expect the story to tell you where all that matter or energy goes, or how the disintegration effect knows how to, well, stop disintegrating things once the original target is vaporized. So in most cases, if one used this power, because of the amount of energy needed, they would be turning people and or objects into bombs instead of ashes. Well, you might still get ashes, but they'd definitely be blowing up. But on the positive side, for those of you who like to look at life with a glass half full, this is an extremely offensive ability, as even people who have a healing factor that can rebuild their bodies back from nothing may have trouble doing so when the user of this power steps into the fray, which in turn makes it a very effective weapon against a regenerator of a sort. So for example, if the disintegration shot is somehow shrugged off as not instantly lethal but still hurtful, expect it to hit but for massive damage, which can be worse for the regenerator because they gotta heal through the pain and everything. And as such, this ability can be viewed as a plot device, as someone with this power is pretty much untouchable and pretty unstoppable as long as they're important to the story. So if you see fodder with this ability, they're usually dealt with pretty quickly so they don't become a problem later on. And with that being said, special conditions are usually given so that they don't actually, I guess, use their power when they're supposed to touch themselves or a loved one. Although that would make for good storytelling and a pretty good reason for why this character decided to turn down a darker path. So just get used to seeing a lot of nihilists and or sociopaths using this power with a horrible backstory to boot. While this power might be a one-trick pony, there are still dozens of ways you can end up with this power as the result of using others. I mentioned temperature earlier, as higher temperatures provide energy which can cause atoms to split on an atomic level. But the opposite is just as true, as the lack of temperature can cause molecules to slow down so much that the target becomes brittle, losing its ability to deform safely under pressure. You can introduce a corrosive element into a system that can make reversal impossible, like acid or poison. You'll also find users that can just turn objects into fine particles of dust or sand with just a simple tap, as well as those who can exert so much force they can literally crush or pulverize materials into separating. If you have someone that has super lungs and sonic screaming, then just tell them to yell so forcefully that objects affected just lose cohesion. Same thing with users of other vibrational based abilities as well. They'll just normally shatter apart. But messing with someone's electrical magnetic field can cause them to lose their physical form, if you will, with the theory behind that being that since they no longer have their own natural electromagnetic field, other electromagnetic fields, or just simply put magnetic fields from passing stars or passing planets, can pull the user apart. There are even examples of this in fantastical contexts, as oftentimes exploiting the weakness of a big bad of a video game or some kind of fantasy world will just cause them to fall apart into dust. It's like they have a weakness that you gotta find somewhere, and once you find it, you'll be able to beat them in one hit, but the rest of their body is invulnerable to damage, something weird like that. But you can also find another real-world example of this power in the form of the infamous locust umbrella tropes. Okay, and for those that don't know what this means, this is something like nanomachines, super small aliens, or some weird unearthly presence that can self-replicate on a massive scale and pretty much devours anything it sees in sight nonstop. Heck, you could even find the concept of disintegration within a slime or blob monster that just rolls over objects and absorbs it into itself, where it's then slowly digested. Or if you like to get flashy, you can even see this in the more fantastical, exotic clashing of regular matter and antimatter, which, if physics is to be believed, will cause a massive explosion and the loss of integrity of whatever matter-filled object was collided with antimatter. Long story short, you can name it yourself. If it exists in extremes, then this power can more than likely be found as a result. So with that being said, common stats of this ability are extremely high levels of attack or offensive power, medium to high levels of speed because nuclear fission, or the process of splitting an atom, which in case you guys didn't know is how you really disintegrate something, happens at relative speeds, which just means speeds that are fractions or percentages of the speed of light, aka near instantly. Anything between 1% and I guess 99% the speed of light is basically near instant to us and the rest of the universe. But continuing on, defensive abilities for this power range from extremely low to extremely high, because you know the saying, a good offense is a pretty good defense. But that's pretty much where the good side of this ability ends, because there's not so much versatility unless there are other powers included, such as transmutation or an molecular manipulation, or an elemental version of disintegration, like extremely high or low temperatures. But you know what? You might even want to check out dust manipulation as well, in addition to ash manipulation. The links are in the description. But in a way, it kind of does have a decent amount of creativity. You just have to be the one to want to put in the effort for it. Okay, now this list is going to be a little different than how I do other lists, mainly the manipulation powers. But let's just see how far we get with this. With the power to disintegrate comes the natural ability to, well, separate things. And in its most humble rendition, this takes the form of making complex systems less complex by simply taking something apart without damaging or corrupting the original form of the target via disassembly. From there, if you wanted to be, I guess, less PG with how you disintegrate things, the user can cause targets to break into smaller pieces regardless of their hardness or original condition with shattering. This one more or less starts to change the physical shape of what you were affecting. But if they aren't one for being chill, they're able to ruin things further by turning anything to dust with pulverization. Now, the result of using any of these applications on a living target or some kind of life form can cause death, inducement, or if they're channeling this ability to disintegrate an inanimate object, then we can call that destruction. Just a little breakdown of the simplistic applications behind this power. Okay, those were the different effects of disintegration, more or less. No matter how it's done, the result will always be one of those previously listed. Now we can get to the fun part, the different variations. With disintegration aura, the user possesses destructive life energy or can surround themselves with the disintegration force so powerful and dangerous that it really dismantles anything within it or that it comes in contact with. If you can make your life force mimic disintegration, whatever that is, then you should be able to apply that property to your physical form in a safe and controlled manner, which allows you to disintegrate one's molecules to dust and eventually integrate them back to a normal form, or the form you had before you disintegrated yourself, with self-disintegration. With this, if the user wanted to, they could control the speed of the dispersal of their body and gain massive locomotive capabilities with scattering. And if you wanted to lean more on the elemental side of wanting to disintegrate those that stand against you, then take a page out of transmutation, because with evaporation, you'll be able to disperse yourself or objects into gases of your choice or affinity. If you lean more on the earthen theme of disintegration, then with granulation, you have the ability to turn objects into minute particles of matter, which then mimic materials like dust or sand. But if I wanted to bring the heat while still fitting within the theme of this power, then incineration allows you to disintegrate the target via intense temperatures. This can be from fire, lava, light, radiation, energy, and/or electricity. Okay, that part was kind of cool. But if you're looking for something a little bit more offensive, then if you figure out a way to harness disintegration and project it outward, just shape it into a beam, stream, ball, or wave and carve away at anything in your path with disintegration beam. If the user fancies himself a doctor without any of the viable proof, then they can become a cancer cell's worst nightmare and take others apart by attacking the power center that makes up the majority of organs and other connective tissues with cellular disintegration, which in layman's terms allows you to disintegrate organic cells. If they want to go a level deeper and reach into the domain of immoral geneticists, then dissolute living biomatter before it even has a chance to structure itself to become cells and organs with DNA disintegration. If you want to stay scientific, then because of the fact that everything has a light electromagnetic field surrounding it that keeps it in its current shape, all you have to do is sap that force away, causing objects to lose the atomic bond that keeps them together. The effects of this range from turning objects to dust, dust into atoms, and atoms into nothing, with electric field negation. This can also double as atomic cancellation, so we'll just slap that on there too. Might as well, right? Who's it gonna hurt? And there you have it. Disintegration in a nutshell. That's probably no longer there because it's disintegrated. This extremely one-note but pretty powerful ability has a lot of ways it can be applied, like disintegrating air to suffocate targets, which counts as limited air manipulation. They can also separate atoms so they release energy, aka explosion creation, and/or they can disintegrate space so you can pretty much teleport. But you know, concepts like that are where the creativity ends. All you're doing is just the same thing, separating or taking things apart. So it would make sense that abilities like reforming, construction, or stronger forms of restoration would be able to counteract this ability. And most definitely transmutation itself can counteract this ability. Remember what I said before about this ability requiring concentration or extreme focus in order to properly aim so you don't destroy the wrong thing? Well, if I didn't, I'm saying it now. It's pretty much a necessity. Hey, there might be certain things that you can't even disintegrate, and you might not even be immune to your own disintegration powers. But other than that, this is a power that'll make you one of the strongest opponents, and most people will be pretty wary around you. And now, with all that out of the way, it's time to place this ability on the scale. Disintegration is useful if you're into just wanting destruction or separation. We all know that it's easier to destroy than build, so if you're pretty lazy, this could be an ability for you. Other people have other preferences, so on a scale of 1 to 10, the Shea scaling system gives this power a separating 6. Cool and all, but still pretty niche and specific. So unless you're talking about taking things apart and not putting them back together, this ability really isn't for you. Just thought I'd say so. Thanks for watching. You guys think of any more applications for this power, jot it down in the comments section. If you're tired of talking about the same old powers I've done before, then jump ahead of line and join my channel membership, where for only $5.99 a month, you'll be able to not only watch the complete video unedited because of YouTube's random copyright, but also future videos that you guys have requested numerous times in the comment section, but I just haven't made public yet, such as these heavy hitters. Yeah. So click now and join if you don't want to wait. If not, I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces.